Life is hard, but it's just point-blank unfortunate if you get to live your entire life as an office worker. We see this in the life of an average salary man who spends his pathetic life rotting away in a cubicle. His daily routine includes a lengthy day in the office with nothing but the clatter of keyboards to keep him company. He then heads home to eat junk food and play video games all night. He continues his monotonous and unfulfilling routine of life, until one day, he has a heart attack and dies as a bottom feeder. Suddenly, he finds himself in an old hospital after being bathed by a bright light, and a lady stands over him with a beaming smile. She wonders how he could look so gentle despite being the son of a certain man. He is confused as he tries to observe his surroundings, but almost loses his mind when he sees a flying dog. A maid steps into the room to offer the woman tea. He loses his mind when he sees the reflection of an adorable baby. He has been reborn as Ars Luvant, the first son of a nobleman. Ars doesn't want to be at the bottom of the food chain again, and so he dedicates himself to extensive study and research. At the young age of 3, he had studied so well that even the maids were shocked by how much the little Ars could write. Due to his diligent study, Ars had become fairly knowledgeable about the new world. The map of this world is unlike anything he had ever seen, so he knew without a doubt that this wasn't the Earth where he lived his entire life as a faceless NPC without any impact whatsoever. He was born in the Summer Fourth Continent, which used to be 6 different empires. However, it was united under the Summer Fourth Empire and became a unified continent. The world was also full of magic and certain magical creatures, allowing ordinary humans to conjure awesome things. The Luvant family is a noble household that rules a small rural region called Lamberg, and the lucky Ars are fortunate enough to live in the massive castle-like mansion belonging to his household, having its maids and cook. Ars also discovered something peculiar about himself, a special kind of power he is certain no one else in the kingdom has. He heads down to the training grounds to observe the soldiers' training and test out his ability again. The soldiers are used to having Ars around and simply leave him to do just as he pleases. Ars watches a poor young soldier getting destroyed in a spear fight, and Ars activates his secret ability, a skill he calls appraisal. This ability somehow pulls up people's skills, potential, and aptitudes as stats that Ars can read. He uses appraisal on the struggling soldier and discovers that he has a high aptitude as an archer. Ars walks up to Malay, the struggling soldier, and suggests that he practices using the bow. However, Malay is a retard who believes bows are for cowards. Fortunately, Ars is relentless and insists he tries out the bow. Seeing the cute lord make the request, Malay decides to pick up the bow and shoots an arrow for the first time. Malay shoots the arrow and it almost hits dead center, startling everyone present. The rest of the soldiers think it's an accident and ask Malay to shoot more, but the accuracy only increases with more arrows, even piercing another arrow. The soldiers flock to Malay and tell him that he is a natural with bows, advising him to become an archer instead, and Malay quickly agrees. They ask Ars how he could tell Malay would be better off being an archer, and Ars exclaims that it was due to his instincts, disappointing the soldiers who expected something more interesting. Ars knew, however, that explaining his appraisal skill to these metalheads would prove futile, so he chose the simple way out. Ars is certain his appraisal skill is both precise and accurate, but is unhappy that for whatever reason, he can't use the skill on himself. That night, while at dinner, Ars is questioned by his father, Raven Luvant. Ars is scared of Raven, who keeps a grumpy resting face, but each time Ars checks out Raven's stats, he is always impressed. Raven is a self-made achiever who rose in ranking from being a pitiable farmer to the lord of the entire village with his martial arts prowess. Currently, Raven's stats are so high that he can fight 10 men by himself and win. Raven asks Ars to continue to own his instincts and ability to discern others' potentials, particularly since he would become the Lord of Lamberg one day. Raven thinks it's important he can recognize and befriend the right allies or retainers. Raven is so impressed that he gives his meal to Ars, urging him to grow quickly. Ars continued to study about the world around him diligently, and he made several unnerving discoveries. The good-for-nothing rulers of the Summer Fourth Empire are corrupt, and the people are beginning to revolt. Ars understands if this continues, there would be a nationwide war that would eventually involve a place as remote as Lamberg. If that happens, the pipsqueak Ars would have to lead his men to war. Unfortunately, he knows he can't fight in a battle in this state. Ars eventually has an idea, and he heads out to town alone. He begins to scan through the crowd with his appraisal skill, searching for any diamond in the rough. He becomes exhausted after a while of fruitless searching, and the people of Lamberg are so useless that they lack skill and even potential. While he is resting, Ars notices a homeless kid being mistreated by the people. The boy is a Malkan, a group of people who are brought in as slaves from across the seas. Ars approaches the boy, called Reitz, and offers him bread. Once the boy receives the bread, Ars activates his appraisal skill, and he is surprised by what he finds. The stats are so high that Ars thinks him the reincarnation of a real-life legend. Ars is shocked by the immense potential this boy has, and he desires to have him. Reitz leaves, but Ars follows him, unwilling to let such a massive talent go to waste. Reitz notices that Ars is following him and asks him to return, but Ars immediately offers him the opportunity of becoming his retainer. Ars reveals that he is on a quest to assemble the best of the best as his retainers, and make his domain stronger. Reitz doesn't believe Ars is the son of the city's lord, and he doesn't want any trouble with the adults either, so he declines the offer. However, Ars is relentless, and insists. Ars promises Reitz a variety of food if he chooses to come, and the glutton immediately agrees. When they arrive at the Louvon mansion, the maids are racist dimwits that treat Reitz like trash. Ars understands that the prejudice against the Malkans runs too deep and decides to change that outlook. He draws nearer to Reitz and insists that they treat him as an honored guest. The maids immediately apologize and serve Reitz better meals. While they eat, Ars learns that Reitz was raised by a company of mercenaries, but they all tragically died and left him behind. A butcher interrupts the conversation and asks Ars when he intends to send Reitz on his way, but he is outraged when Ars reveals that he intends to keep Reitz as a retainer. The butcher exclaims that Raven wouldn't accept a Malkan within his ranks, and Ars decides to confront his father. Raven refuses to accept Reitz as a retainer because he thinks Malkans are inferior to average Summerforthians. However, Ars insists on retaining Reitz because he is so sure of his talent. He suggests that Raven test Reitz and judge if he has talents or not. Unfortunately, everything takes a drastic turn when Raven announces that the test will be a mock battle between himself and Reitz. Ars knows there's no way a 14-year-old like Reitz would win against the experienced Raven, talented or not, and so he tries to talk Raven out of the duel. Raven states that they wouldn't fight on an equal footing, but he believes that if Reitz is just as talented as Ars claims he is, then the test would prove that. Ars agrees, and they leave for the test. While they approach the training grounds, Reitz asks Ars why he is doing so much to make him a retainer in the Louvon household. As a Malkan, he has always lived his life as a bottom feeder without a future, and now, Ars is presenting him with the biggest opportunity of his life. Ars explains that he needs Reitz for when he becomes the Lord of Lamberg. He needs Reitz to help govern and keep everyone safe. Reitz is overwhelmed by Ars's faith in him and promises to pass the test. At the training grounds, the soldiers stand by and watch as Raven prepares for the test. The rules are simple. Reitz would only become a retainer if he successfully lands a strike on Raven before the time runs out. Ars knows that Reitz doesn't stand a chance against Raven in a real fight, but if all that is required is to land a single punch, then he is certain Reitz can pass the test after all. The fight begins and Raven takes the offensive. Raven throws powerful strikes that push Reitz to his limits, forcing him to either evade or spend his entire might blocking. Reitz acknowledges that Raven is too strong and fast for him to match, and Ars begins to think Reitz would fail. However, the soldiers observing are shocked because they are a bunch of weaklings who can't even hold their swords properly after a single attack from Raven, but the strange Malkan seems to be hanging on. Unfortunately, Raven successfully lands a strike on Reitz, and Reitz falls to the ground in pain. Reitz struggles to rise to his feet, and Raven reminds him that he is almost out of time. Reitz recalls Ars's sincere plea for help and becomes determined to win. Reitz rises to his feet and launches at Raven. He maneuvers around Raven's attack and brilliantly uses the rays of the sun as a distraction. Everyone is shocked by Reitz's powerful strike, but Raven blocks it. However, the attack successfully grazes Raven, and he announces that Reitz has passed the test. Ars is delighted as Reitz exceeded his expectations. Raven praises Ars for discovering another talent, and tells him he'll be a great lord or emperor if he continues to hone his skills and instincts. Ars wonders if he could become the emperor. Raven admits that Ars's future is bright, but becoming the emperor is a dream too lofty for a frog at the bottom of the well. He is nothing but an insignificant lord in the grand scheme of things, and making a name for himself is already doing enough. The soldiers flock to Reitz to congratulate and acknowledge his skills. Later, Ars checks on Reitz to see how well he is fitting into his new life, and he is delighted to see Reitz's new attire. Reitz explains that he is also taking on the role of an assistant in the mansion to repay Ars for all he has done. He kneels and pledges his loyalty to Ars, promising to serve the Louvon household till the day he dies. Reitz easily blends into the Louvant household and is quickly accepted by everyone in a few months. He helps with errands in the house and trains with the soldiers to polish and increase his skills. And he has also been studying hard to improve his knowledge of things. Ars is both delighted by how quickly Reitz's stats continue to improve, and how everyone seems to love Reitz once they get to meet him. Even the difficult maids think he is handy and cute. Reitz visits Ars for their usual learning sessions, where they learn the history of the continent and its current situation together. Reitz reminds Ars that the empire used to be 6 kingdoms, but they were all besieged and united by one of the rulers who declared the entire continent as the Summerforth Empire. This was a critical history that happened over 2 200 years ago. Unfortunately, the current sovereign is a brat called Baidoras, an 8-year-old that probably doesn't even know how to wipe his ass. This has caused his corrupt retainers to take powers into their own hands, and the empire is rocked by revolts on all sides. More kingdoms are seizing the opportunity to regain their autonomy and become independent of the empire. Ars thinks about how Raven has to ride out to fight revolts every time, and he asks Reitz where he thinks the first major conflict would break out. Reitz thinks the first major conflict would break out in Mission, their kingdom. The current king is ill and on the verge of death. He has 2 sons, and the first son should become the next king by tradition. However, the younger son is said to be much more capable than his older brother. Sadly, the king is torn between appointing a successor, and there is chance a war would erupt if he dies without naming one since both sons want to be king. If a war breaks out, the kingdom would be torn between the 2 sons and the districts that support them. Lamberg is a small settlement within the Kanara district, and Raven has no choice but to support whoever the Lord of Kanara asks him to. Ars becomes worried, but Reitz assures him that these events would only provide him with the opportunity to continue to rise even higher in rank and influence. Right after their classes, they leave to scout for more talented prospects to hire as retainers, and they find Raven training hard outside the mansion. Raven notices Ars is heading out for his usual scouting and asks him to keep an eye out for someone who has great magic talent. Raven explains that mages are powerful assets that can easily turn the tides in a battle, but their household mages are trash with little talent. Ars recalls when he tested his aptitude for magic, his results were so bad that Raven never asked him to practice another spell. With Raven's request in mind, Reitz and Ars ride to the capital city of Kanare to scout for incredible talents. Ars is blown away when they arrive at the city. It has a population multiple times larger than Lamberg, and the people look wealthy. Ars quickly activates his appraisal skill to scout out talents, but where people abound, trash abounds even more. Searching for a worthy talent was like seeking a needle amongst haystacks. Ars becomes exhausted and takes a break, hoping to continue the search once he recovers his strength. While they walk around the city, Ars discovers an ugly sight of hungry and homeless people. This breaks his heart, and Reitz confesses that there's nothing Ars can do to save them at the moment. Ars acknowledges this fact but vows to build a domain where everyone has a chance to make a fortune. They continue to the market and Ars is in awe of all the food and beautiful objects. A merchant nearby displays large eggs and claims that they are dragon eggs, urging Ars to purchase one for himself. The retarded Ars doesn't think about the shady deal and jumps at the offer, but Reitz steps in and calls out the merchant for attempting to defraud Ars. Reitz loses his mind and almost stabs the merchant, but Ars calls for him to stop. Reitz apologizes for going too far. However, Ars is more frightened by how much Reitz would defend him. He encourages himself to stop being such a fool, or Reitz could end up killing others in his defense. They continue their search while Ars indulges in diverse frivolities. He intends to purchase candy, but gets robbed instead. Reitz picks him up and begins to chase after the nimble thief. Once they get close enough, Reitz grabs their cloak to reveal a young but tattered girl. The girl turns into a deserted corner and Reitz turns after her, but they find her being attacked by a group of thugs. They scolded the girl for running away and hit her. Ars expresses his big mouth and infuriates the thugs. One of them attempts to punch Ars, but Reitz steps in to stop the punch. The thug decides to attack Reitz instead, but pays dearly for his daring decision. Reitz defeats him with a single punch to the stomach and beats up the remaining thugs in succession. The thugs become frightened and they run away. Ars turns back to the girl and uses his appraisal skill. The girl has an insane level of prowess and a S-tier aptitude for magic. This means this girl would be a prodigy if she becomes a mage, and Ars asks her to be his retainer without hesitation. Reitz wonders why Ars would offer to take a thief as his retainer, but Ars reveals that she has godlike magical talents. However, the girl refuses. She thinks Ars is nothing but a privileged, good-for-nothing brat who was fortunate enough to be born into nobility. Reitz demands that she returns Ars's purse, which she reluctantly does. They learn that she was caught stealing from a noble and sold her off to a slave trader as a slave, but she escaped and has been on the run since. Ars wonders why she doesn't just leave the city and escape to start a new life, but they soon discover that she is catering to a lot of homeless orphans by herself and refuses to leave them behind. Ars becomes moved with compassion and gives her his money to take care of herself and the little orphans. That night, Ars sits outside their lodge and reflects on the words of the girl. Reitz approaches and encourages him, assuring Ars that he is nothing like the other awful nobles out there. However, Ars thinks she is right because he has taken his privilege of being born a noble for granted and has failed to treat others with even more respect. He vows to build a better city and help others like her. While they talked, they saw the orphan children running down the streets and screaming out the name of the thieving girl, Charlotte. Ars and Reitz approached them to know what was wrong. The kids explain that the thugs from before returned and that they have kidnapped Charlotte. While in captivity, Charlotte thinks about how unfortunate her life has been and tries to recollect the last time she cried. It wasn't when she realized that her parents were long gone, or that she would probably be treated like a piece of crap. Her life is so tragic she can't remember the last time she cried. The thugs take her to their base, where they beat her up for causing too much trouble. The slave owner scolds them for touching her face. He thinks that her worth would only decrease if her appearance becomes ruined. He explains that Charlotte's buyer is a pervert who has a thing for pretty young ladies. The thugs notice Ars's purse and they seize it from her, but she snatches the purse and attempts to escape, but they catch her and beat her up. The brain-dead slavery tells Charlotte that it's useless to run because escaping would only lead her to a life of pain and continued penury. Suddenly, the door breaks open and the guard falls to the ground, knocked out cold. The thugs and the slaver turn to see Reitz at the door, preparing to give the bastards a real beatdown. Some of the thugs charge at him, but they are puny insects compared to his might. He easily blocks their attacks and beats them up until the slaver orders the thugs to stop. Ars arrives and runs down to check on Charlotte. The slaver asks who they are and why they are messing on his turf. Ars swiftly appraises everyone and he calls the slave by his name, Albert, asking him to let Charlotte go. Albert refuses and claims that Ars should understand, being a noble, that slaves are properties without a will of their own. Charlotte asks Ars to leave and not put himself in any more trouble, but Ars only glares at her with pity. He wonders why she looks so empty, and praises her again. He discovers that her ambition stats are really low, near zero, and this means that she has given up on her future. She has zero tenacity, and has no desire to improve, or live for anything anymore. This infuriates Ars, but Albert only laughs and states that this is normal for any slave. Ars shuts him up, and insults him for being an irresponsible part of the society. Ars is livid with adults like him, who make the world a terrible place for children to live in with their greed and corrupt philosophies. Charlotte once again recalls her life, and how she steeled herself against tears because they make no difference. Growing up as an orphan who was detested by everyone around her, she believes tears are a sign of weakness, and weakness only means death. However, she wept uncontrollably as she watched Ars stand up for her against Albert. Albert, not Einstein, becomes furious and summons the rest of his retarded thugs. Reitz and Ars scan through and conclude that there is not a single person of notable skill in that building, and Reitz promises to deal with the thugs upon Ars's request. One of the thugs attacks, but Reitz chokes him with a single hand, perfecting a chokeslam that knocks out the retard. Reitz's expression turns dark as he unveils his blade and swears to kill all of them. The thugs attack anyway, but Reitz crushes them like a swarm of insects. He easily avoids their uncoordinated attacks and cuts them down with his dagger. Two of the thugs are mages, and they summon a flame against Reitz, but Reitz cuts through the flame like it's butter and defeats the mages. It became clear that Reitz was on another level entirely, and Albert was frightened. Albert decides to reveal his ace and calls on a mercenary. The mercenary descends the stairs, and Charlotte panics at his size. Albert explains that he used to be a captain in the army that got kicked out due to his shitty behavior. The mercenary demands more booze, and Albert promises him all the booze he wants if he beats Reitz. The mercenary smirks as he thinks he could easily beat Reitz, a big mistake. Ars asks Charlotte to remain calm and assures her she would be safe. The mercenary attacks Reitz, but Reitz evades the punch. Reitz lands his punch and disorients the mercenary. Charlotte watches in awe as Reitz knocks out the mercenary with an uppercut. Albert becomes devastated as he watches Reitz destroy all his men. However, he refuses to let Charlotte go and insists that Charlotte is legally his property since the laws of the district permit slave ownership. Ars offers to purchase Charlotte and lawfully make her his property. Albert refuses the offer, but Reitz explains that they're just being nice. Allowing them to purchase Charlotte would also help save his face among other slave traders and give the impression that Charlotte was bought and not seized from him by nobles. When Albert realizes that Ars would do anything to set Charlotte free, he agrees to sell her to them and receives his payment. Ars asks Charlotte to leave with him, but Charlotte explains that she has something to show Ars and Reitz. After a long time of walking, Charlotte leads Ars and Reitz to a beautiful cliff where they see the entire city. Ars is impressed by the beautiful scenery and asks Charlotte why she has decided to share the view with them. Charlotte explains that the view is what keeps her going when she becomes overwhelmed. She asks Ars why he wants to build a city for the likes of herself, and the retard responds that it's simply because he loves children. However, he further explains that there is a way children can fill everyone around them with hope and happiness. He believes he, like every other responsible adult, needs to help build a world where children can grow in peace and without prejudice. Charlotte is both impressed and delighted, and she agrees to become one of Ars's retainers. If Ars will eventually build the ideal kind of society, Charlotte wants to be a part of it. Reitz decides to test Charlotte's magical aptitude. He presents her with the object that allows mages to harness their magical powers. Charlotte has never attempted a spell, and confesses she doesn't know what to do. Reitz teaches her how to use the object while Ars watches with excitement, hoping to see what a genius-level mage would look like. When it's time, Charlotte casually raises her palm and casts a basic fire spell. A bright light shines as a massive fireball shoots into the sky and causes an explosion that makes even the sun turn dim. The people in the city can only stare at the sky with their mouths wide open, unable to fathom the source of such a devastating explosion. The magic is so powerful that the object shatters immediately. Ars and Reitz remark that Charlotte is amazing, and Ars exclaims that he can't wait to see just how powerful Charlotte can become. Charlotte asks Ars to send whatever salary is hers to the orphans of the city, before kneeling to swear her loyalty to Ars. They return to the city to bid farewell to the orphans, and Ars is delighted with himself, as he now has 2 reliable retainers he can depend on to help him build the city of his dreams and protect his people. When they arrive home, Raven rejects Charlotte because he thinks the battlefield is too dangerous for a woman. However, Ars instructs Charlotte to show Raven what she is capable of. Raven is wowed when he sees the fireworks, and he welcomes Charlotte into his home. The war continued to brew in several parts of the Summer Fourth Empire, and now, the Kanar district has been caught in another conflict with the neighboring province of Sites. Raven has been dispatched multiple times along with his soldiers to assist in the war, and he keeps on returning victorious. The greatest addition to their ranks so far has been Charlotte. She has grown a lot in just 3 years and has become a very powerful mage. With her OP abilities, she easily earned the name Lady of Flames for her incredible feats. She has also made the entire mage corps better with her incredible leadership skills. Ars now has 2 younger siblings, twins named Kreitz and Ren. According to Ars's appraisal, the babies are also very talented, and they would be crucial to the future of the household. Reitz arrives with news about a new family of hunters that just moved into Lamberg, and states they have very promising sons. Ars is delighted by the news, and suggests they head there right away. While they prepare to leave, they notice Charlotte, who is off duty, reading on a tree, and she volunteers to follow them to see the new prospects. There is a single horse, so they have to ride together, and things get awkward for Ars fast, though he has a very comfy ride to the woods. Meanwhile, Reitz and Charlotte continue to argue about who is better suited to keep Ars safe. While they ride, they see a boar charge out of the bush, but an arrow strikes it and falls immediately. 2 boys race to the dead animal and admire their kill. Reitz calls out to greet them, and Ars activates appraisal as soon as they approach. He is delighted by the stats he sees, and he is confident they are the promising prospects Reitz heard about. Ars explains that he has an offer for the boys, and they lead him to their home for a meal. Ars appreciates their kind gesture, while Charlotte begins to eat like a mannerless glutton. One of the boys reveals that the meat is from the animal they hunted, called Suze. When the father of the boys asks Ars what his request is, Ars responds that he wants the boys, Marcus and Gatos, to serve as soldiers. The news delights the man and his sons, as both boys have always dreamt of becoming soldiers and making a name for themselves. The father appreciates Ars and acknowledges his eye for talent. He compares Ars to his last son, Roselle, who he thinks is daft despite being the same age as Ars. The idiotic Roselle couldn't have chosen a worse time to sneak in and steal some bread from the table, but his father stops him from leaving and demands that he pays some respect to Ars. Roselle is a recluse who struggles to respond to his father. Ars seizes the opportunity and uses appraisal. The stats are so incredible that Ars chokes on his drink. Ars believes Roselle must be the reincarnation of some legendary strategist. With stats so high, Ars is certain that finding a match in the entire district would be a miracle. Ars ignores the idiotic father apologizing and requests to have Roselle as his retainer. However, Roselle is scared because he thinks he will die if he becomes a soldier. He refuses the offer and runs away in panic. The father apologizes again and expresses his doubt about Roselle becoming a retainer. Roselle is too fragile to work or hunt like his brothers and has been reclusive ever since her mother died. Ars reveals that Roselle's power is his mind and that he has the potential to be a great strategist. Ars can't stand losing a talent like Roselle and enters his room to state his offer again. Roselle is startled when the crazy Ars steps into his room and tries to hide. Ars converses with Roselle and learns that Roselle loves to read. Roselle was fond of reading the book his mom used to read, and that helped him handle his grief. Ars has an idea and asks Roselle to visit the Louvant household library. Roselle hesitates, but Ars is convincing. The cowardly Roselle then adds that his brothers must accompany him on this excursion. Roselle is a crybaby who's scared of everything. He even cries out for help when he is approached by a pet dog. Ars instructs Charlotte to show the older brothers around the barracks, and he leads Roselle to the library. Roselle almost has a stroke from seeing so many books in one place, and Ars announces that he is free to read as much as he desires to. He leaves Roselle to explore the collection and asks Reitz to look after him. A while later, Ars jerks awake from his slumber and rushes back to the library, worried that a bored Roselle would have left. He is shocked when Reitz reveals that Roselle continued to read all he could lay his hands on until he slept off from fatigue. Reitz is more surprised that Roselle easily retained the new words Reitz taught him and reasoned beyond the books to have a deeper understanding of topics. Ars activates the appraisal skill, and Roselle's stats have gone even higher. Ars is in disbelief that someone could absorb and grow so much in just a brief period. Marcus and Gatos arrive from their excursion and prepare to return home. home, but they find Roselle fast asleep among a pile of books. Gatos wonders why Roselle loves books so much since he isn't supposed to know how to read. Ars could not believe his ears because he was certain Roselle could read. Roselle conveniently wakes up at that instant and is somehow fully ready for absurd questions. Ars asks him how he learned to read, and Roselle explains that he learned how to read by watching his mother read while he was little. He would match the pronunciation to the words, and practice multiple times by himself until he could read the entire book. Everyone disbelieves because this should be impossible, but Roselle claims he is all good since he doesn't forget anything from his childhood. No one could contain their shock, and it was clear that Roselle was a genius. When the boys leave, Ars becomes concerned and wonders how he could get Roselle as a retainer. Reitz suggests that they show Roselle and Greg, his father, just how brilliant Roselle's mind is. They return to the forest the next day and give Roselle a challenge, asking him to build a trap to capture the Sioux without hunting with bows or arrows. Roselle thinks he can't because Sioux is so smart and fast, but his brothers and Reitz encourage him. Roselle agrees to try and he builds a massive trap in no time. Greg is baffled by the massive structure, but he is further astonished when he notices a herd of Sioux inside the structure. Roselle explains how the structure works by taking advantage of the Sioux' reaction to colors, and how he has measures in place to keep out nursing mothers and young Sioux to ensure that they don't die out. However, Greg gives a cold reaction and asks Roselle to leave with his brothers. This makes Roselle heartbroken, thinking his father hates him. That night, Roselle locks himself in his room and cries. He believes he is the cause for his mother's death, and that is why his father hates him so much. Fortunately, he overhears his father and his siblings discussing on the roof. His father confesses that he feels terrible for not recognizing Roselle's true talent. He has always been focused on his son's weakness, and has since ruined Roselle's self-esteem. He wishes Roselle could simply hate him and leave. The next morning, Greg bids his sons farewell and asks Ars to take care of them. However, Roselle appears and asks to leave with Ars. Greg tries to avoid a confrontation and leaves to chop wood, but Roselle does what the spineless man can't. He promises to work hard in the city and bring his dad over once he is capable, and Greg breaks down in tears, apologizing for all he has done. Ars is delighted that not only has he found promising recruits, but he has also mended the relationship between a father and his son. Marcus and Gatos vow to serve Ars with everything they have as they agree to join his army. A few years later, Ars is now 9 years old, and Raven is ill. Ars offers to lead the soldiers to their next engagement, but Raven insists that Ars is too young to go to war. The situation in their province has worsened since the governor passed away. In his will, the governor named the younger son, Vasmarke, the next governor. However, the older son, Kuran, rejects the document's authenticity and claims it was forged. This has led to a civil war splitting the province of Mission between the supporters of either son. With the war intensifying, the neighboring province has seized the opportunity to further attack the districts at the border, and widespread war is inevitable. While Ars is lost in thought, his father reminds him he has other important things to think about. Ars wonders what Raven could be referring to, and Raven announces that his betrothed would be arriving that day. Raven casually hands him a letter, and the crook doesn't even apologize for not informing Ars earlier. Ars rushed to inform his retainers about the betrothal in panic. That instant, a maid announces that Ars's fiancé is just outside the mansion. Ars steps outside the mansion to welcome his betrothed. He panics because he was a loser who didn't have a girlfriend in his past life, and sucks at talking to girls. The betrothed is a beautiful noble girl called Lisha. Ars is blown away by her beauty, and activates his appraisal skill. He is terrified by her immense diplomacy and ambition. Ars immediately becomes wary, as he thinks her pleasant aura could be a pretense to let him lower his guard and seize his throne from him. Ars becomes determined to unravel her true motives, and he keeps his guard up despite being struck dumb by her good looks. Ars leads Lisha and her butler, Jean, into the mansion. Jean sees Reitz and remarks that he is a Malkin, but Lisha scolds him immediately. She knows Reitz by name and asks Jean to apologize for his disrespect. The maids love Lisha and present her with flowers. Lisha is polite and pleasant. Ars is a loser that sucks at conversations, but he is impressed by how she continues to carry the conversation. However, the stupid Ars continues to keep up his guard and ensures that it all doesn't get to his head. Ars is worried he won't be able to take her around town because of the weather, but the weather miraculously changes just as Lisha assures him they would. Ars ignorantly asks if she could control the weather, but Lisha explains that it's just common sense judging from the movement of the clouds. Meanwhile, Roselle and Charlotte are spying on them. They also conclude that Lisha is almost too pleasant and something should be off about her. Ars leads Lisha into the town and introduces her to everyone as her betrothed. They stumble upon a merchant arguing with a customer over an order. The customer requested a type of magistones, but the merchant supplied an entirely different type. Ars believes he should intervene as the Lord of Lamberg, but he is scared he would fail, and Lisha would eventually see him for the incompetent noob he is. Charlotte and Roselle arrive at that time, and the daft Charlotte offers to interfere with her magic. Lisha stops her, and Charlotte gets defensive. However, Lisha compliments Charlotte for her feats on the battlefield, and easily charms her. Roselle is disappointed at how easily Charlotte got disarmed and flattered. Lisha then offers to settle the dispute in return return for a favor if she succeeds. The two villagers had begun to fight, but Lisha broke it up. She disarms them with a flattering comment before presenting herself as Ars's fiancée. Lisha offers to purchase the wrong magistones since they are needed in her city, and offers to provide the needed variants because they are abundant in her city. So convenient. She further adds that it was all Ars's idea, and the people are delighted that Ars is concerned about all their affairs. The dispute is settled, and Ars appreciates Lisha for her help, acknowledging her diplomacy. On their way back to the mansion, Charlotte tells Lisha she thinks she is awesome, but doesn't accept her as Ars's betrothed yet. Lisha is sad, and asks if she can request for the favor she earned. Ars becomes uneasy as his thoughts begin to run wild, and he becomes tense when Lisha insists he only speaks the truth. Lisha simply asks Ars what sort of person he likes. The question is so unexpected that Ars freezes. Ars knows he can't outsmart Lisha, and he couldn't tell what she was after either, so he decides to tell the truth. The insecure retard tells Lisha that he likes someone who is always honest and doesn't hide anything from him. Lisha simply smiles and acknowledges Ars's answer. That night, they eat an exquisite dish made by Ritz, and Charlotte also puts up a magic show before everyone leaves to sleep. Ars feels defeated as he prepares to sleep, because he is still unable to uncover Lisha's true motives. Our boy is unprepared when he finds Lisha hiding in his room. Lisha enjoys his horrific look of shock and teases him. She explains that she is there to have an honest conversation with Ars, since he likes people who hide nothing from him. They begin to converse, and Lisha tells Ars that she wants to know what he thinks of her. Ars is shocked by the question, but Lisha further explains why. She can tell people's true emotions even when they hide them, and she could tell that Ars's principal emotion towards her has been suspicion. Despite her efforts to make Ars relax, she could only feel his suspicion deepen and wonders why he can't trust her. Ars can imagine how terrible Lisha would feel since he had truly been suspicious of her all day, and he decides to tell her the truth. He reveals his appraisal skill and how his actions have been based on Lisha's diplomacy and ambition stats. He is scared that all her actions are merely a calculated ruse to let him lower his guard while she seizes his throne. Lisha understands Ars's fear and admits that she is truly ambitious. However, her ambition is to become the ideal lady who is perfect for her husband, and she has no intention to seize a throne or dominate Lamberg. She agrees that Ars is the lord of a small domain, but she would gladly marry him because he has immense potential and a truly promising future. Using her ability, she could tell that the people of Lamberg love Ars genuinely for who he is, and that he could make them happy without even trying. She accepts to marry Ars and admits to now liking him just as much as the people Lamberg does. The clueless Ars freezes in embarrassment and watches as Lisha leaves. The two cringe over their embarrassing conversation, but resolve to acknowledge each other's sincerity and beauty. Lisha leaves the next day and continues to think about how terrible other nobles are. They always lied about how they felt, and Lisha resented how she could tell their true sentiments despite their posh attempts to hide it. Then she learned that the best path of security for a pleasant lady is to get married to a powerful lord who truly loves her. She was initially disappointed when she was to be betrothed to a minor house like Louvant, and she intended to merely make acquaintances and cut off the engagement later. However, Ars's continuous suspicion made it impossible for her to disarm him. Spending time with Ars made her realize just how kind he is, and how much the people around him genuinely love him. She has been enchanted by this young lord, and she wants to be by his side always. Things continue to get better at the House Louvant. The civil war abated, and Raven's health continued to improve drastically. Another 2 years had passed, and Raven's health had worsened. The doctor advises Ars to begin to prepare for the inevitable, as his father would certainly die. Ars wishes Raven could stay alive a little longer for him to repay his kindness. Meanwhile, in Castle Arcantes, we see that the governor was attacked by an assassin. The assassin promptly offs himself when he is cornered by the guards. The news reaches the districts, and that changes the outlook of the war. Roselle predicts that the war will only intensify between the brothers and their supporters. Raven notes that the head of Canar district, Lord Lumiere, would support the elder brother, and all the domains under the district, including Lamberg, would have to follow suit. Raven instructs Ritz to ready the forces and have them move once Lord Lumiere summons them. Raven attempts to rise and makes his preparations, but he falls due to his failed health. A letter arrives from Lumiere shortly after, and Ritz suggests that he represents Raven along with Charlotte. Ars refuses and announces that he would go in his father's stead. Time has passed, and Lisha becomes worried as she now has fewer letters from Ars. Ars arrives in Castletown, Canary's capital, and he is accompanied by Charlotte and Ritz. Ars introduces himself at the castle gates and demands entrance into the castle. However, the retarded guard is in disbelief and refuses to let Ars in despite seeing the invite. Charlotte interferes, and the guard recognizes both Charlotte and Ritz due to their feats on the battlefield. The guard apologizes and escorts them into the castle. Ars was getting cold feet, but Charlotte asks him not to be scared. They are welcomed by Menas, Lord Lumiere's assistant and director of affairs. Menas understands that Raven must be ill for Ars to be present in his stead. Ars uses his appraisal skill and discovers that Menas is above average in so many attributes, making him an impressive wildcard. The sneaky Menas presents Reitz and Charlotte with an opportunity to join their army, but they quickly decline. Ars is led into the meeting room, where the lords of the other domains were waiting. He fidgets as he greets them and proceeds to take his seat. Lord Kral, one of the domain lords, is impressed by his fine greeting and acknowledges how much Ars has grown. Ars immediately recognizes Kral, who used to play with him when he was younger. The second lord, however, continues to glance at Ars with contempt. Lord Lumiere arrives in the room and salutes everyone present. Ars greets Lumiere while activating his appraisal skill. He is impressed by the stats as they are well befitting for the lord of a district. He also noticed that Lumiere and Menas have complementary stats that make them a formidable match. Lumiere begins his address and informs them that there will soon be an all-out war. He states that he intends to support Koran, the older son, and asks the domain lords for their opinions. The lords agree with Lumiere and pledge their support. Lumiere is glad, and he further announces that the neighboring province intends to capitalize on the situation and renew their assault. He instructs the lords to ready their forces for the conflict. Ars is relieved when the meeting ends, and he is approached by Lord Lumiere. Lumiere praises House Louvain for demonstrating strength way beyond their size, and he declares that he has high hopes for young Ars. Ars is approached by the lord, who continues to glare around him with contempt. The lord introduces himself as Hammond, and Ars realizes he is Lisha's father. Hammond complains that Lisha has been distraught for a while because Ars has refused to write back or reach out to her. Hammond explains that Lisha has been delighted since she met Ars, and that makes him happy, seeing that she had a pretty rough time growing up and witnessing noble feuds. He pleads with Ars to continue to treat her daughter well at all costs. When they arrive home, Raven learns that Ars responded to Lumiere's summon without informing him. Ars panicked, thinking Raven would cross at him, but Raven praises him for his wise actions instead. Ars returns to write a response to Licia's letters, informing her about recent developments and the impending war. Ars joins the soldiers in training and begins to train with Reitz. Reitz is worried about Ars and asks him to rest, but Ars is not able to relent. He recalled a mock exercise where he led a group of soldiers into a coordinated war. He sucked so badly, and their losses were heavy. He also freezes whenever a real soldier dashes at him, and this is why he continues to train hard. While they train, Roselle runs in and informs them that the province of Sites has invaded Lord Kral's domain. Lord Lumiere has summoned the forces of Lamberg to take to the field right away. The invasion is a critical one, because if the domain falls, then smaller domains would get matched on by Sites. Ars realizes that his father is in no condition to fight, and so he decides to lead the forces by himself. Reitz vows to protect Ars on the battlefield, and promises that his first war would be victorious in his first engagement. Ars summons the entire army of Lamberg to address them, but as it begins his address, his father appears and stops him. Raven rebukes Ars and explains that he would be leading the army by himself. Ars warns him about his health, but Raven is ready to die in the service of Canare and Lamberg. Ars is certain that with Charlotte and Reitz by his side, he would be victorious. However, Raven explains that he isn't concerned about the victory or Ars' safety. Rather, he is concerned that Ars is yet to have the face of a warrior. Ars is confused as he doesn't understand what Raven means, and so Raven decides to demonstrate it. He orders the soldiers to bring a terrible convict from the dungeon. The convict, Baramoda, is a heinous prick who is guilty of multiple charges including rape and murder. Baramod's execution has only been delayed because Raven is ill, but Raven decides to have the execution there. Raven gives Ars a test. If Ars can watch a man die without losing his composure, then he is ready to lead the forces of Lamberg into battle. The criminal is not remorseful, and he says even more despicable things. Raven orders the execution, and Baramoda is beheaded. Ars tried as hard as he could to remain collected, but he breaks down from nausea and falls to the ground. Raven tells him the reaction is perfectly normal, but it only means Ars is not yet ready to take to the battlefield where multiple men die continuously. Ars is left in the rain as Raven matches out with the rest of the army. Reitz, Charlotte, and Roselle attempt to console Ars, but Raven orders them to continue their match without stopping. Ars breaks down and begins to weep under the realization that he is a child who isn't ready for war after all. The war continues to intensify at the conflict boundary. Raven and Reitz are menaces on the battlefield that continue to inflict crazy damage wherever they go. Roselle actively coordinates the army and hands out instructions to inflict maximum damage. Charlotte's spells are massive and devastating each time. All through the war, Raven's condition continues to worsen, but he fights with all he has. The invading army was twice the defending army of Kanar, but the impressive performance of the Lamberg forces won them the victory. Raven eventually retrieved the castle, and the army returned a few days before Ars turned 12. Raven's health had gotten so bad that his men carried him home. Ars goes to receive Reitz, Charlotte, and Roselle. They notice Ars is injured and ask what was wrong, but he tells them it's only a minor scratch from his training. He learns that Raven did well in the war, but his health deteriorated as soon as the battle ended. Ars blames himself for letting Raven lead the expedition, but the others console him. Ars immediately leaves to continue his training. despite it being late. Charlotte informs the others that she learned Ars continued to train hard while they were away on the battlefield. As they discuss their worries about Ars, Litzia arrives with Jean. She complains that Ars's letters are not as empathetic as they used to be. Ritz explains the chain of events to Lisha, including the execution and Raven's decline in health. Lisha is heartbroken and asks to see Ars. They lead her to the training grounds, and they witness Ars throwing himself into his training. The instructor warns that Ars needed to rest, but he continues to fight nonetheless. A maid approaches the party and informs them that Raven has regained his consciousness. They are delighted, and Roselle attempts to inform Ars, but the maid adds that Raven requested to meet them before seeing Ars. The three of them arrive in Raven's room, and he thanks them for heeding his call quickly. Raven asks them what they think of the Louvain household. They tell him they are delighted and already see the household as their home. Raven is pleased and announces that he will soon succumb to his sickness. The others want him to stop, but Raven is only being realistic. He recalls when each of them arrived in the mansion for the first time, all discovered by Ars. Now they have become the very pillars that hold up his forces, and for that he is grateful. He continues to request Ars. Raven believes that Ars isn't strong enough for the battlefield, and that the responsibilities of being a lord aren't something Ars is truly prepared for. He regrets not showing Ars the harsher realities of the war on time, and pleads with the three of them to support Ars. The three are all indebted to Ars for changing their lives, and they would readily give their life for him without Raven's request. They swear to protect Ars under any circumstances and continue to uphold the name of the Louvant household. They bow and appreciate Raven for taking them in when Ars asked him to. Ritz asks Raven to have a word with Lisha, and he agrees. The three depart when Lisha arrives, leaving them to talk. Raven reveals that he met Lisha when she was much younger, and he noticed how kind she was to everyone around her. This was why he suggested the engagement, because he wanted someone as kind as Lisha around Ars. While he tries to convince Lisha to stay, Lisha reveals that she has already decided to marry Ars. She knows Ars would continue to work hard until he surpasses Raven, and that she loves him either way. Raven is pleased and he appreciates Lisha for her kind gesture. Lisha exits the room and informs the others that Raven demanded to see Ars. She appreciates Ritz for his kind gesture and departs. Ritz, on the other hand, is torn apart that Raven would eventually die. Ars arrives in Raven's room, and he is delighted to see his father awake. Ars begins to go on and on about his extensive research into Raven's sickness and all the herbs he has prepared to try. Raven ignores all of Ars's gestures and acknowledges that he has grown. He tells the story of how he was born in a remote farming village with a terrible tyrant lord. Raven couldn't bear to live under such a ruler, and he eloped to Missian, where he witnessed the majesty of the governor. He made a resolve that instant to be a man like the governor who was graceful and could rule many soldiers by himself. This led him to intensive practice until he became a soldier, and his deeds on the battlefield earned him a name until he was appointed lord over a domain. He has devoted his life to protecting the people of Lamberg since, and he pleads with Ars to do the same. He knows that Ars might feel guilty for letting him lead the last expedition and watching his health worsen, but he assured Ars that he would have done that either way because he would do anything to protect the people of Lamberg. Ars is sad and lost for words, but he promises Raven to take care of Lamberg with all his might. Raven is pleased, and they continue to discuss. First about Lisha, and then about Raven's childhood. They continue to talk all through the night until Ars's siblings and his mother join them. The next morning, Raven was already dead. The entire town gathered that night for the funeral. Raven asks his siblings to bid their father farewell before dropping a flower. Ars announces that Raven has appointed him as the next lord of the domain. He admits to not being as strong as Raven, but he asks them all to trust him as he would protect them just as well as Raven did. The entire crowd burst into shouts of approval, urging Ars to continue to be the loving man he is. Charlotte remembers her time in battle with Raven and how he cared for her. Raven constantly asked her to save her best for when Ars is on the battlefield. Roselle also remembers Raven's fatherly care in the library while he spent all night studying. Licia recalls his last request, asking her to take good care of Ars. Ars announces that he is now the Lord of Lamberg, and everyone present bows to pledge their allegiance. Somewhere in Missian province, two good-for-nothings are busy gossiping about the strife for succession. They discuss rumors about the assassination of the governor and the possibility of one of his sons being responsible. While they discuss, a drunk and shady lady approaches them, interested in what they have to say. It's been 3 months since the death of Raven, and Ars is already getting a hang of his duties as the Lord of the Domain. He visits Raven's grave to talk, before leaving on a trip with Ritz and the others. At Castletown in Canare, Lord Lumiere and the other domain's lords pay their respects to Raven. Lumiere welcomes Ars as equal, inviting him to stand on an equal footing with the rest of the lords. Once they are seated, Lumiere continues to discuss matters concerning the province. He announces that Lord Kuran, the older son whom they support, has raised an army, and this means the war will soon become full-fledged. Minas further explains that the capital is currently occupied by the younger son, Lord Vasmarke. Vasmarke has more resources and men than his older brother, but Kuran occupies Semplar, a vital city that controls trade. Since the brothers look like they are on an equal footing, they begin to turn to districts in neighboring provinces for support. The major district Kuran desires is Parena, as it provides the best route to besiege the capital. However, despite their continuous attempt, Parena refuses to join their cause. So Lumiere announces that they plan to invade Parena and seize it. Ars has a different suggestion, and he proposes a different approach to Lord Lumiere. A few days prior, Ars and the others had considered the situation of things, and had predicted every domain's move based on the intel they had gathered. However, Roselle senses that something is wrong with Parena but can't clearly state what it is. Reitz then suggests that they hire mercenaries to dig for information. He knows a band of mercenaries called Shadow, and he volunteers to arrange a meeting with them. Roselle asks Ars to request that they deal with Parena, and this is why Ars has a different suggestion for Lumiere. Ars believes finding the reason for Parena's stance should inform a better approach. Lumiere agrees, and gives Ars some time to investigate. Reitz is impressed by Ars's composure all through the meeting, and praises him. They arrive at an orphanage where they see the 4 kids Charlotte used to cater for. The kids are all grown and grateful for Charlotte's continued provision. They are welcomed by the keepers of the orphanage and other children. The orphanage was built by Ars, and he instructed the keepers to take in as many orphans as they could find living in the alleys. The kids are all grateful to Ars and Charlotte for changing their lives. Ars is glad he built the orphanage in Kanara instead of Lamberg, since it exposed the orphan children to more opportunities. Licha suddenly arrives at the orphanage with Jean, who is promptly invaded by a group of children. Licha explains that she accompanied Hammond down to the council meeting, and she merely decided to visit since he was still in town. While they discuss, a child covered in mud soils Lisha's clothes, and Ars apologizes profusely. However, Lisha joins the little kids to play instead, not minding her dress. That night, Lisha learns of Ars' plans to meet the group of mercenaries, and she offers to accompany him. Ars tries to turn her down, but fails. He is even further shocked when he learns that Lisha will be staying the night. Things get awkward when Charlotte and Lisha begin to insist on sleeping together with Ars. Roselle attempts to escape, but he is also captured and dragged along by Charlotte. Both Ars and Roselle couldn't sleep all night. The next day, Reitz announces that they have an appointment with the Shadow mercenaries, and they leave the orphanage, bidding everyone farewell. Reitz reveals that their appointment with the mercenaries is at a bar on the outskirts of town. Ars is impressed that Reitz could arrange an appointment with a group as difficult as the Shadow mercenaries. He learns from Reitz that there are different types of mercenary groups. Some were known for frontline activities, while others engaged in more covert operations, including intelligence and assassination. The spineless Ars becomes frightened. Reitz's only concern is that the Shadow mercenaries have a new leader, a young leader who is far more competent and has improved the entire group's capabilities by a great degree. The new leader only takes up offers that intrigue him, and Ars hopes he finds their request intriguing enough to accept. They arrive at the bar, and they are welcomed by beautiful attendants. However, a guard prevents their entrance and asks them to leave. Reitz responds with a code phrase, and the guard leads them to a special table. The bar is filled with punks that continue to stare at them while they are seated. Charlotte is pissed and offers to roast the bastards, but Reitz forbids her from using her magic. Ars knows that the leader of the group must be somewhere in the bar, observing them, so he activates his appraisal skill. He turns to a young female attendant to place his order, but his appraisal skill is still active. His expression turns grim for a second, and everyone wonders what could be wrong. Ars quickly regains his composure and requests for a drink. Once the attendant leaves, Ars decides to use the bathroom. He has a panic attack in the bathroom, and he checks to see if his appraisal skill is functional. The attendant from before had stats that rivaled Reitz, and it was a man disguised as a teenage girl. While Ars pondered, he was suddenly attacked by the attendant. The attendant asks to know how Ars could tell his real identity, threatening to kill Ars if he doesn't provide a reasonable answer. The door flings open and Reitz enters the room, attacking the attendant and restraining him. Ars wondered how Reitz could tell something was wrong, and Lisha arrived just in time. Lisha insists that the mercenary group leader is obliged to accept Ars's offer since he assaulted Ars. They negotiated for a while, and Ars got to see how terrific a negotiator Licia is. The leader accepts their offer but demands to know how Ars could see through his disguise. Ars confesses that it is due to his appraisal skill, and he even mentions the leader's true name. The leader is impressed and introduces himself as Pham, acknowledging that Ars's power is truly terrific. He agrees to take Ars's request and fixes another appointment with him. Ars learns that his expression changed when he used his appraisal skill on the waitress, and that Lisha could read his true emotions. She informed Reitz and asked him to follow Ars. Ars understands that Pham must have realized his expression, and this is why he attacked. Ars appreciates the two for saving him from the psycho. Later, they make their request known to Pham. Ars asks him to find out why Parena District refuses to stand down. Pham names his price and demands an advance, asking Ars to meet him again in 5 days. Ars thinks the time frame is too short, but Pham assures them that he is most effective in intelligence missions. Meanwhile, Charlotte continues to eat like a glutton, ignoring Roselle's request for her to leave a meal for the others. Ars and the others return to the table, and Charlotte asks where they had been. Ars explains that they already met the leader of the mercenary group, and that he has agreed to perform their tasks. Roselle is envious that he didn't get to meet the leader of the group. The waitress arrives again and delivers another order to their table, winking at Ars as she leaves. Ars are dumbfounded. Fam's disguise is so good, he is doubting the things he had seen. 5 days later, Ars and Reitz return to the bar to see Fam. The bar is empty this time because everyone else is out on other jobs. Fam explains that he handled Ars' request by himself because he felt it was interesting, and the investigation was a success. He believes he has uncovered the reason why Purina District won't side with Kuran, and he presents Ars with a document. Unraveling the document, they discover that it is a pact. It bears the signature and seals of all the nobles who have sided with Lord Vasmark. Upon further inspection, Reitz notices it includes the seal of another district, the Massa District. Massa District is a powerful district that flaunts one of the biggest infantries in the continent. Reitz is sure that they'll be a powerful addition to whichever brother they support. The problem is that the district has already pledged to support Kuran, like the Kanar district. However, it is indisputable that their seal is on a document supporting Vasmark. Reitz establishes that if the document is genuine, then it means Massa District has betrayed Kuran and the others. This simply means an invasion of Purina will continue to fail since the Massa District is in very close proximity. This probably explains why Purina isn't scared of Kuran and his men. Ars is baffled at why Massa District would choose to defect and support Vasmarka. Reitz questions the authenticity of the document and asks Fam how he acquired such a document. Fam refuses to share his sources, but he promises them that the document was stolen directly from Purina's headman. Ars appreciates Fam for his efforts and offers to pay the rest of his fee, but Fam decides to let him go as an act of apology for his assault a few days back. Fam also states that he is ready to work for Ars again whenever he desires. Ars appreciates Fam for his help and informs Reitz that they should report to Lord Lumiere right away. In Castle Kanar, they present the document to Lord Lumiere. Lumiere is shocked that Massa would betray them and join Vasmarke after being loyal to Kuran for years. Lumiere understands that fighting against Purina would cause heavy losses and considers a different approach. He gives Menas the document and asks him to send a copy to the other domains. Lumiere praises Ars for his valuable information and suggests they meet Kuran together. However, Menas returns and shows them that the seal for Massa is fake. To prove his point, he compares the document with others containing the seal of Massa District. Ars realizes that there are tiny discrepancies that indeed show that the seal had been falsified. That situation wasn't as it seemed, as Purina had just been deceived by Vasmark to think Massa already betrayed Kuran. Ars is impressed by Menas's keen discerning eyes and concludes it could be a special skill his appraisal couldn't discover. At first it seems like a ridiculous plan since the truth would eventually be uncovered, but on a closer look, Roselle reveals that Vasmarka has ulterior motives. Purina would certainly fall if it were to be attacked by Kuran and his forces. It is nothing but a disposable district. Vasmark's real agenda is to take possession of the explosion Magistones, a special kind of Magistones that can only be found in 3 districts in the entire continent of Summerforth. Possession of the Magistones would boost the explosive abilities of mages to a whole new degree. This means that Vasmark intends to mine the stones and strengthen his army. Roselle uncovers even more problems. Seeing that Purina should have been allied with Kuran and his domains, a battle between both parties would destroy Purina and weaken Kuran's forces. The only way out is to approach Purina and tell them the truth to secure a bloodless resolution. Lumiere agrees with Roselle, but he thinks the plan will fail because Purina has always turned down messengers from Kuran. Ars decides to act as the messenger and visits Castle Purina by himself. The headman asks him to state his reasons for visiting, and Ars claims that his domain wishes to join Lord Vasmarka. He explains that this decision was made because a force like Massa decided to change sides. Purina's headman explains that he changed sides for the same reason as it was better to join the winning side. Ars go as far as telling the daft headman that even Lord Lumiere intends to join Vasmark. The retarded headman is instantly delighted and praises Ars. However, Ars begins to ask questions concerning the authenticity of the document. The headman is a dimwit that made no efforts to confirm the authenticity of the document, only taking a crook like Vasmark for his words. Ars wonder if it isn't daft to choose sides in a war without making the right research and gathering enough intelligence. The headman becomes furious when he realizes that Ars has no intention to join Vasmark. He orders his soldiers to arrest them, but Reitz draws his weapon and intimidates the soldiers in an instant. Ars assures the headman they are not interested in a fight, and claim that they have a piece of information for the headman. The second figure behind Ars eventually reveals himself, and he is Massa's headman. Ars then asks the fool to inquire if the pact is genuine or not from the headman himself. This was all Roselle's idea. Another one of his brilliant traps. They headed to Castle Massa and presented the pact to the headman, who attests to the fact that the seal is fake. Ars suggested that he write them a letter to prove that the seal is fake. but the headman is so furious that he decides to go by himself. He scolds the headman of Parena for making such a stupid decision, despite being the ruler of an entire domain. The headman apologizes and asks to side with Kuran again. Massa's headman leaves the decision to Ars, and Ars accepts Parena back into their pact. Massa's headman is impressed by Ars's actions and comportment, asking to improve as much as he can. Ars returns to Raven's grave to narrate everything that happened, adding that the frightening Vasmark already stole a lot of Magistones from Parena within the short period of their alliance. Ars also appreciates Reitz and Roselle for their help in handling the situation. Suddenly, a maid comes running and announces that Lumiere's carriage is at the mansion. Lumiere visits Raven's grave to pay his respects and informs Ars that Lord Kuran has demanded his presence. Ars panics as he doesn't expect Kuran to meet the lord of a tiny domain like Lamberg. However, Reitz and Roselle encourage him, telling him it's his chance to make a name for himself and form alliances. Charlotte is preparing for the party, and she second-guesses all the attire she has. She's shocked when a maid comes to inform her that the others have already left for the party. In the carriage, Reitz and Roselle wonder how infuriated Charlotte would be when she learns that they departed without her. They turn to Ars, who is daydreaming about the invite. He learns that the party is just for Kuran's closest allies, and it would certainly be full of powerful nobles. Ars is marveled when they arrive at Semplar. The city is massive. Ars realizes they have a lot of work to do if they intend to make Lamberg as massive as real cities. Reitz reminds him that the party is a great opportunity to get his name out there. When Ars arrives at the hall, immediately falls under the gaze of so many nobles, who wonder whose child he is. He realizes Lumiere is influential, as he is approached by many nobles. Lumiere calls Ars and introduces him to the other nobles as the Lord of Louvant, Lord Ars. They are interrupted by the sound of trumpets, signifying Kuran's arrival. Once the door opens, everyone bows, and Kuran salutes them in return. Ars immediately uses his appraisal skill to check out Kuran's aptitude, and he is impressed by what he sees. Kuran has very high stats across a wide range of attributes, something truly befitting for the ruler of the entire province. Ars wonder if it is true that Vasmarki is much more impressive than Kuran, because it would take an inhuman to surpass these stats with ease. He believes that it must have been an attempt to undermine Kuran's capabilities. Kuran begins to address the entire gathering. He appreciates them for honoring his invitation and reminds them of the state of their province. He states that the source of the entire uproar is Vasmark, who seeks to overrun the rightful heir to the throne. To make matters worse, Summerforth is no longer a functional empire and cannot intervene or restore peace within its provinces. Kuran claims that there is no remedy for a degenerate empire, and a new one must be forged from its ashes. Kuran announces that he intends to defeat Vasmark, unite the Mysian, and form a new empire, the Mysian Empire. Kuran's speech is charismatic, and it makes everyone's blood boil. The nobles yell in unison, affirming their pledge to support Kuran all through his conquest. Kuran decides to appreciate Ars's recent efforts. He summons him up to the podium and states Ars's feat of foiling Vasmarke's plan to turn Parena against their alliance. Kuran believes Ars has done more than any of the nobles present, and asks them to all give him a round of applause. Ars quickly genuflects deeply in appreciation. The banquet continued and everyone began to eat. However, Ars has spent so much time talking to the nobles that he can't eat. Reitz decides to fetch him a meal, but Ars steps outside the hall as soon as he is free. He is suddenly startled by Kuran, who appears at his side like some creep. Kuran states that he intends to have a proper discussion with Ars. He claims that Lumiere had said so much about Ars, especially his gifted eye to pick out people's talents and aptitudes. Kuran is certain that this is the reason why a small domain like Lamberg continues to do awesome things. Kuran asks Ars if he has seen if any of his subordinates are talented. Ars has used his appraisal skill earlier, and he had found all of Kuran's subordinates to be average. He struggled to give a response, but he eventually mustered enough courage to tell Kuran the truth. Kuran admits that he is right. His subordinates are sincere and willing, but they lack in terms of raw talent. Kuran states that Vasmark, on the other hand, has a plethora of talented retainers, and this is why this battle would be difficult despite having a larger force than Vasmark. This is why Kuran was proud of Ars's achievements. It only meant that he finally had another talented retainer on his side. He promises to promote Ars to the headman of Canare if they win the war. Ars is shocked and deeply appreciates Kuran, since that means Lord Lumiere would be promoted to an even bigger domain. When Kuran is leaving, he asks if he could have Ars's best retainers. Ars refuses, as his retainers mean everything to him. Kuran understands the response since it was expected, so he asks Ars to join his war council instead. This means that all of Ars's major retainers will join Kuran and share their expertise in the War Council. Kuran urges Ars to find even more talents before leaving. Ars is excited by Kuran's requests, and he promises not to let him down. Meanwhile, Vasmarka has a meeting with his top generals in the capital. He is informed that his plans to turn Parena against Kuran failed. The generals inform Vasmark of all the advantages they have over Kuran, and they assure him he won't lose the war. However, Vasmark is unimpressed. He wants a 100% chance of winning before the war begins. He asks one of the generals, Thomas, about Mireille. Thomas responds that Mireille is a wretched drunkard who is nowhere to be found. Vazmark is interested in having her back because of her immense talents, and he is scared another noble would have her for themselves. Thomas is sure that no noble would hire someone like Mireille. Ars returns with news to Lamberg, and he informs the others that Kuran wants them to join his war council. He also intends to search for more talents, and he asks Reitz for an efficient method. Reitz suggests they ask Fam since he has so much intel. They inform Fam about the search, and he agrees to help them. He assured Ars that he would only provide him with the very best talents on the streets. Ars is delighted, and he returns with Reitz to meet the others, but he bumps into a drunkard on the road. She is covered in a cloak and does a silly job of apologizing to Ars. She turns into Fam's bar and requests food. Fam tries to turn her out, but someone at the bar recognizes her. He refers to her as Mireille, a drunkard he used to hang out with. Mireille asks to get a job at the bar, but the cook intends to turn her out. However, Fam asks him to let Mireille stay, assuring him he has his reasons. Mireille is a disaster in the bar, and she messes up all her servings, but the worthless drunkard isn't remorseful and even asks for a meal. After a hectic workday, Fam asks Mireille about what she used to do. Mireille attempts to avoid the question and continues to call Fam a boy despite his disguise. Mireille eventually tells Fam her story. She used to work for the governor before he died, but she abandoned the palace as soon as the entire tussle began. She has been roaming all through Mission since. Fam tells her that he has a better job offer and contacts Ars. Ars is delighted when he receives the letter, but a maid soon comes to inform him that the candidate is just outside the door. They rush to the door and Fam presents Mireille. Ars quickly recognizes Mireille as the drunkard from the streets, and Mireille is still drunk during the meeting. Reitz thinks she is trash and wants to scold Fam, but Fam assures him Mireille is the real deal. Mireille takes a liking to Ars and states she has no problem working for him despite being a little boy. Ars decides to check her stats before making his decision, and he is blown away by the figures he sees. Mireille is simply incredible. Her prowess and her leadership stats are ridiculously high. She has a current ingenuity that is higher than that of Roselle, and her ambition is far beyond that of Lycia. Without a doubt, Ars concludes that this crazy drunkard before him is nothing but a monster. Mireille realizes that Ars remains frozen despite staring at her for a while, and she asks if he intends to hire her. Ars states her full name, Mireille Grandjean, and Reitz immediately becomes alert. Fam confirms that she is indeed the former advisor to the late governor of Mission, Governor Amador. Mireille is carefree and admits she once worked for the governor, and the eccentric Charlotte immediately accepts her. However, Roselle and Reitz warn Ars, and they ask him not to make Mireille his retainer. Reitz claims that she has a somewhat terrible reputation, as rumors have it that she was driven away from the castle. He also includes that her younger brother, Thomas Grandjean, is currently Vazmark's right-hand man. Thomas is rumored to even be greater than Mireille, but Reitz is worried that this hag might choose to betray them and pass Thomas their secrets. Mireille insists that they are all rumors, and claims that she doesn't even know that Thomas works for Vazmark. The others remain very skeptical of her, and she complains that she doesn't feel welcomed. Fam asks Ars for his decision, and despite Reitz and Roselle kicking against it, he decides to hire Mireille. Ars admits that it's dangerous to hire the crazy and questionable Cocoon, but she has genuine skill, and that is something he can attest to. He hopes he can eventually figure out what her ambition is, but the rest of her skills are just too good to let go. Mireille is embarrassed by how much Ars believes in and desires her talent. Ars pleads with his top retainers to give Mireille a try, and they all agree. Mireille is excited when she hears the news and makes a toast to working with the rest of the retainers. A few days later, Reitz's voice resounded across the mansion. He storms into Ars's room, livid. He blatantly states that he doesn't think Mireille is fit to be his retainer. The lazy hag always neglects her duty, spending all day asleep instead of getting anything done. The soldiers complain that she refuses to give pointers or instructions in the training hall, making her battle experience useless. Reitz tries to call her to order, but she refuses to listen. Reitz thinks she's a blemish to the name of House Louvant and suggests they just kick her out. While Reitz complains, silly Roselle runs in with a complaint of his own. He claims that Mireille refuses to teach him with books and sentences him to a sprint instead, urging him to figure out the meaning all on his own. He wonders why a strategist even needs to run since he won't be engaging in actual combat. Ars asks them to be calm, promising to talk to Mireille as soon as possible. Suddenly, they hear massive explosions and all the soldiers become alert. They quickly begin to prepare for combat as they believe it's an invasion. They are shocked to find Charlotte and Mireille at the site of the explosions. Turns out the eccentric numbskulls decided to test out Charlotte's powers, and Mireille advised her to use a greater percentage of her powers. Ars asks why Charlotte didn't just restrain herself as usual, but Mireille states it's no fun if Charlotte is restrained. Ars is super glad it isn't an enemy attack, and he prepares to let them go easy, but the soldiers are not having it. They complain that Ars isn't taking it as seriously as he should. The maids also let loose their complaints about how Mireille only causes more work for them and does nothing to help anywhere. The despicable sweet-talker tries to wriggle her way out of trouble, but everyone is too pissed. Mireille turns to Ars and asks for his opinion. Ars hesitates, but he admits that he wants everyone to get along, and he might be forced to kick her out if she keeps being a hassle. Mireille's expression turns serious for the first time, and she admits that she doesn't want to leave the house Louvant. Ars wonders why she would want to stay despite all the hostility thrown at her, and she admits that Ars is the only person to genuinely accept her since the late governor. Ars is shocked by her response, but she quickly discards the awkward atmosphere. She admits that she might have to prove her worth to everyone, and so she suggests a mock battle. The reason is that she doesn't get serious unless it's a combat situation, and she thinks a mock battle can do just that. She asks that she has to be made a retainer if she wins the mock battle. Ars considers refusing, but Rights accepts the challenge. He and the other soldiers are interested in seeing just what she has to offer. Ars realizes there is nothing he can do about things, and allows the mock battle. Licia arrives just as they are about to start, surprising Ars. She informs him that she is only present to spectate and cheer them on as they fight. Mireille is delighted to finally meet Licia, whom she has heard so much about. Licia is flattered, and she returns to gesture by informing Mireille that she had heard so much about her from Ars' letters. She claims Mireille is nothing but a good-for-nothing strategist who only eats all day and does absolutely nothing in return. Ars denies saying that about Mireille, although he complained multiple times about everyone's dissatisfaction with her. Mireille ignores Ars's complaints and hugs him, asking that they get married instead of Licia. Ars tries to break free from her grip, but he fails, and he turns to Licia with dread. Licia only gives a faint smile, but you could tell Ars was dead. Eventually, it was time for the mock battle to start, and Ars announced the rules of the exercise. The battle would be between two teams of 50 members each. They would utilize the vast forest to the east of the mansion, and it would last until sunset. Whichever team slays more soldiers will take the victory, and slaying the other team's general would mean instant victory. The weapons include wooden training swords, and you're disqualified or slain once you get hit in your head or your chest. Once he is done with the rules, he calls for any questions, and Charlotte asks if magic is permitted. Ars responds that her fire spells are not permitted since it would end the entire battle immediately. Charlotte feels let down and asks what she is expected to do. Ars gives her vials of light type and sound type magic. They are generally safer since you can't directly attack people with the magic, but crazy Charlotte still uses one of the spells just for fun, startling everyone present. Ars asks them to select the team of their choice, and he decides to join Mireille's team since she wants to see what she is capable of. However, none of the soldiers side with Mireille as they all prefer to stand by Rites. Ars is shocked and asks why no one is joining their team. The sneaky bastards want Mireille fired so much that they refuse to join her team just so she can lose. Charlotte, on the other hand, just wants to fight against Mireille because they are both brain-sick. The soldiers force the noobs and inexperienced soldiers to join Mireille's side, while Ars tries to fetch them teammates. Mireille remains carefree and continues to drink her booze. Ars is exhausted because the exercise seems to make Mireille's relationship with everyone else worsen. The exercise eventually begins, and everyone fetches their supplies. A lot of people come to watch the mock battle, including Jean, all the maidservants, Ars' mom, and even siblings. Charlotte observes Rites' team and suggests that the teams are not equally matched. She thinks the exercise is rigged and Mireille would most likely fail, but Rites isn't bothered by this. He thinks that Mireille is a disruptive force that can harm the unity of House Louvant, and the soldiers agree with him. Roselle is the general for Rites' team, and the spineless loser has his concerns. He thinks Licia and Charlotte are already too terrifying, and adding another OP female into the team would just make the female faction of the force too insane. He runs to Rites and pleads with him to do his best. Meanwhile, Ars is the general for Mireille's team, and he pleads with the unwilling soldiers to do their best. Mireille is the excited one, and others remain motionless. Ars wonder if Mireille thinks she can win the mock battle considering the strength of the opposing team. Mireille admits to having seen Rites in training, and she acknowledges that he has monstrous strength. Mireille also notes that Charlotte is really powerful, and she should be capable enough to wipe out the opposing squad with a single strike. She asks Ars how he keeps scoring talent after talent, and Ars responds that he just asks politely. Ars asks if she thinks their squad can get anything done, but Mireille states that the entire squad is filled with inexperienced idiots. The soldiers protest, they know they are trash, but they don't need a silly drunkard telling them. Ars steps in and asks Mireille not to speak too much about their weaknesses, but Mireille responds that they have nothing but weakness and disadvantages. She knows they are all newbies, and they have no sense of teamwork, but she has an infinite number of strategies that will secure them victory. She is so certain they will win the mock battle, regardless of whether they like her or not. Rites' team set up traps around the perimeter, and they can easily notice when their enemies approach them. Rites decides to go over the plan once more. He knows that the opponent is weaker in a direct conflict, and their best bet is to maximize long-range assaults. Rites plans to cover as much ground quickly and attack their opponents directly without waiting it out. The plan is to split the squad into two units led by himself and Roselle. His unit would match out while Roselle's unit would follow from a safe distance. If Roselle gets ambushed, he'll summon Ritz with sound magic, and Ritz is confident they can get back faster than Mirei's useless squad can get anything done. Everyone agrees to the plan, and Ritz urges them to put in their best. The spectators can see as the squad splits into two separate groups. Jean notices the moves and remarks that Ritz is quite cautious. Lisha admits that Ritz's caution has always led House Louvain to victory, and she wonders how Mirei would respond. While Ritz's team advances, they hear that one of their traps has been triggered, and they rush down to check it out. They discover a lone mage that is a part of Mirei's team. He presents himself to Ritz and asks to join his team. The others think it's a trap, but he offers to tell them Mirei's plans. He informs them that Mirei has anticipated that they would split into two groups, and so she has an elaborate plan to lock Ritz and his squad up in the training hall as a trap, while they attack Roselle's team with everything they have and seize victory. The soldiers are surprised that Ars would agree to such despicable plans, and wonder if it is true. The mage asks to join their team again, but Wright sees through his bluff. He knows that the drunk hag is pretty convincing, but he is sure that she couldn't get Ars to agree to such a despicable plan. The mage confesses that he is telling lies and tells them that Mirei sent him there to tell them lies. Ritz asks him why he is admitting, and he claims that he dislikes Mirei, who has shown him nothing but pain since she arrived. He continues to tell them Mirei's actual plan to ambush them, and his part to play by alerting his party with sound magic of their location. He pleads with Ritz to let him join his squad. Ritz asks him to surrender his catalyzer, which he does, but Ritz asks them to detain him. Ritz believes the mage has ulterior motives, and he is proven right when the soldiers discover another catalyzer on the mage. After a brief interrogation, they learn that the mage is supposed to alert Mirei with a second catalyzer when they let their guard down. Ritz believes Mirei would be a sitting duck as long as she doesn't see the signal, and he continues to quietly lead his squad through the forest. They see a squad in the forest and quickly ambush them. However, they soon learn that they are mannequins clothed as real soldiers. Mirei laughs and teases Ritz for being so predictable. Ritz ignores her and claims that he can still win since Ars is there without a squad to protect him. He believes if he charges Ars with all he has, they will land a hit and be declared the winners of the battle. Mirei laughs and promises Ritz that she will outlast every single one of them, including Ritz. She grabs Ars and begins to run while Ritz and the others chase with all they've got. Ritz's chase of Mirei and Ars continues to intensify, and the audience starts to get hyped. The losers are cheering for Ritz, obviously, particularly the lousy maids. They want Ritz to win the mock battle so that Mirei can get disqualified. Ars, on the other hand, is terrified of the assault and asks Mirei to run even faster. However, Mirei laughs and promises Ars that the snails behind her can't catch up even if she crawled. Ritz urges his soldiers to ruin even faster because he is certain that they would win if they caught up to Mirei and whacked the useless Ars. The soldiers run even faster, but when they get close enough to Mirei, they begin to fall into diverse traps. Mirei chuckles as she finds the dimwits trapped in nets. The soldiers must have the brain of a toddler because the traps were too obvious to be missed. Ars was amazed that they fell for the traps. He hasn't seen such elaborate traps since Roselle's contraption. The soldiers see Ritz's determination, and they resume their chase. Ritz begins to avoid the traps, and even runs through others, undeterred. Ars becomes even more frightened, as Ritz looks even more frightening the closer he gets, and the soldiers are following his lead. Mirei notices the gap away from their pursuers has reduced drastically, so she moves on to the next phase of her plan. She instructs Ars to use earplugs, and she does the same before unleashing a series of flashbangs. The sound from the bombs is so loud that all the soldiers become disoriented, clinging to their ears. Ritz is also slightly disoriented. However, Ritz keeps his eyes open until he catches a glimpse of the hag and the useless Ars dashing through the woods. He immediately resumes his pursuit with even more fervor. Ars becomes scared, and he informs Mirei that Ritz is only angrier. Mirei is impressed by Ritz's resilience and skill, but she is more worried that there is no signal from the rest of her team yet. The audience is as lousy as ever, all proclaiming their support for Ritz and his team. Lisha is jealous that Mirei gets to carry her betrothed around, and she screams for Ritz to catch up and give Mirei a proper beatdown. Ren and Kreitz, Ars's siblings, are also enjoying the spar. They wonder where the rest of Ars' team are. Roselle and Charlotte are slowly advancing, and Charlotte suggests they move faster and catch up with Ritz's party. Roselle refuses and explains to her that Ritz must have broken formation and gone ahead because he is engaging the enemy, and the best move is for them to avoid that conflict for as long as possible. However, they are suddenly startled when they see a few soldiers from Mirei's unit who had been hiding in the bush. One of the soldiers asks the others to prepare for an ambush while they launch a sound bomb to alert Mirei of their location. Roselle observes closely and realizes that there is only half the company present, so he concludes that the others should be engaged with Ritz's party. He believes that since the other half will remain engaged by rights, then there is no promise of reinforcements. He informs his group that the ambush contains only half the number of their opponents, and if they are equally matched in number, they have the advantage of expertise and war experience. Roselle's soldiers march towards their opponents with confidence. Taking down an equal number of weak and new scums should be a piece of cake. Unfortunately, they were wrong. Mireille obviously factored in the fact that half her unit couldn't beat Roselle's squad by themselves because they were noobs and the others were professionals. She taps into their frustration against the pompous pros that gave them so much hard time before, and sends the entire squad. Roselle and his group are distraught when they realize that they are outnumbered, 2-1. Mireille's forces enclose them on all sides, and a full-scale assault begins. Roselle freezes in shock, and so does Licia when they realize that Mireille is fighting Ritz's squad all by herself. Mireille is delighted with her plan, and she revises it again with relish. She would hold down Rights and the stronger part of their forces, while her noobs ambush the opposing general, Roselle, and crush them with overwhelming numbers. Charlotte realizes that the situation is hopeless, so she grabs Roselle and she begins to escape. She intends to catch up to Rights and help him win against Mireille. When the soldiers draw too close, she unleashes a sound bomb and enhances it with her magic, releasing a stunning bang that shakes the entire forest scape. The sound travels as far as reaching Mireille and Ars. Everyone could tell Charlotte was responsible for the massive explosion, and this allowed Mireille to pinpoint Roselle's exact location. Wright senses that something is wrong, and he wonders what it could be while he gains on Mireille. Roselle is grateful for Charlotte's intervention, but he is surprised that the soldiers have already restrained Mireille, disqualifying her from the mock battle. The soldiers charge towards Roselle, and he begins to make his escape, running with all his might towards Rights. Licia finally uncovered Mireille's plans. It wasn't to provoke Rights, it was to distract everyone else from the fact that she was coming for Roselle herself. Licia decides to spectate the end from a closer proximity and ventures into the forest. Rights has also uncovered what Mireille's plans are, and Mireille is impressed, but she asks Ars to hold on tighter and suddenly doubles her speed. Ars is flabbergasted that Mireille can run even faster than she previously did, but becomes terrified by Rights, who simply increases his pace to keep up. Mireille is surprised by Rights keeping up to her speed and praises him. Rights thinks back about how he has promised Ars to defeat anyone on his behalf, and he thinks he will be failing his oath if he loses to this drinking hag, so he continues to steadily increase his pace. Ars begins to get dizzy, as the two monsters run even faster. Mireille eventually finds Roselle dashing in their direction. Roselle sees them ahead and attempts to stop, but the soldiers are chasing him keenly behind. Rights orders him to keep approaching Mireille at full speed, and the challenge comes to its climax. Mireille drops multiple flashbangs to derail Rights, but he remains undeterred. He unveils his wooden sword, ready to spank Ars and win the event, but Mireille releases one more flashbang. When the dust settled, Mireille had landed her hit, while Rights had yet to, marking her the winner of the mock battle. Mireille's company cheers once they come to the realization that they won. Ars is blown away by Mireille's ability, as she single-handedly won the mock battle against all the veterans with nothing but flashbangs and a company of idiots, in order of importance. That evening, Ars announces the results officially and declares Mireille and her team as the winners of the mock battle. The veteran soldiers are downcasted, and they murmur about Mireille's methods. However, Rights scolds them, and he reminds them that all is fair in war, and that they lost either way. Even though they had a superior force, they lost because Mireille was just better. He admits that although he finds Mireille's attitude hard to accept, she still leads a group of noobs by herself, and he respects her for that. He apologizes for losing and promises to do better. Rights approaches Mireille and apologizes for everyone doubting her. Roselle and the rest of the veteran soldiers do the same. Ars is happy with their actions, but he is scared that the daft Mireille might ruin everything with her nonchalance and drunk responses. Fortunately, Mireille responds with her brain and commends her competitors. She commends Rietz for his peak leadership and skill. She commends Charlotte for her continuous increase in her magic, and she commends Roselle for just being as brilliant as she expected. She finally turns to Ars and commends him for having such a team of talented retainers. She asks what Ars is plotting. Our humble boy genuinely responds that he only intends to amass a force so strong and defend his domain all through the warring season. Mireille is fascinated by his sincerity and kindness, but she thinks he can be better. She suggests that since Ars values peace so much, he should just become the emperor and end all wars. Everyone remains motionless at the crazy suggestion, but Mireille is certain Ars can become even greater. Ars recalls his conversation with Raven, where he assured him he'll be a great man and joked about him becoming the emperor. Mireille quickly reverts to her jolly self and breaks the tense atmosphere, calling for a celebration of her victory and acceptance into the Louvain household. The party is held that night, and Ars congratulates everyone for doing their best in the mock battle. They all begin to party, eat, and drink booze. Mireille participates in several drinking competitions, and she wins every one of them, out-drinking the silly excuse of men in R's forces. They watch with awe as she continues to down several cups of booze. One of the noobs asks her to teach them just to be like herself and make the veterans of war. Mireille states that there isn't much to teach them like they assumed there is, because Wright's training routine is already so good she can barely make any adjustments. She admits that they are even stronger than the other soldiers of other domains, and would do fine in actual combat. While they discussed, Roselle figured out why Mireille always made him run instead of other training. She only wanted him to gain more stamina and move better in an actual combat situation. Chances are the strategist is targeted and even exposed. It takes more than just strategic thinking to survive in such situations. Roselle now understands that if the strategist dies, then even more soldiers will lose their lives. Roselle vows to run and build even more stamina and coordinated movement, but the silly Charlotte collides with him. Mireille seizes the opportunity and asks Charlotte to start firing spells at Roselle whenever he fails to run as fast as he should during training. The psychotic Charlotte immediately agrees, showing Roselle just how much he would suffer henceforth. Roselle becomes frightened of how terrific the women in the house of Louvain are. Ars and his betrothed observe the entire party from the sides, and Licia apologizes for her actions earlier. Like every other woman, she allows her emotions to cloud her judgment, and she becomes jealous of Mireille instead of her fully accepting her. She assures Ars that Mireille is the perfect retainer, and that she would be accepted by the forces of the domain. Ars realizes this, and he is glad. Reitz approaches Ars, and Licia excuses them to talk. Reitz immediately begins to apologize profusely for his disgraceful actions during the mock battle. He reveals that he had sworn an oath to Raven that he would always stand by Ars, and that he would never lose a battle, mock or not. However, Ars assures Reitz that he performed better than all expectations. He promises to choose Reitz over and over, and keep Reitz at his right hand always. In response, Reitz promises to train even harder than he had always done, until he surpasses everyone. Ars asks him what he thinks about Mireille's words, that Ars would become the emperor. Ars thinks he can't get that far, and that Mireille was probably joking. But Reitz assures him that they all believe he can get that far, and even surpass the continent. Reitz assures Ars that when he declares his intention to become the lord of the land and end all wars, he would give his life to see Ars become whatever he chooses to be, as will all the other retainers and soldiers in the land. The next day, Ars bids Licia farewell, and they both promise to write each other letters. They hear the soldiers dragging Mireille out of bed to begin her training. Reitz is like a monster that continues to destroy soldier after soldier in training, forcing them to become even stronger. Charlotte, on the other hand, laughs maniacally as she tortures the innocent Roselle. A maid delivers a letter from Lord Kuren, and Ars summons the retainers, informing them of the summon to join Lord Kuren's war council imminently. They promise to do their best and ask Mireille to come along. Mireille agrees to work along with Roselle and come up with incredible plans. Charlotte also insists on accompanying them, and Ars asks everyone to get prepared.